Whenever he creates something, Alvar Aalto always starts by a phase of free expression, akin to abstract art, to let a master idea emerge. It's not easy to know whether he was originally inspired by the undulation of a wave or a horizontal S shape. The only thing we can know for certain is that this accessory of architecture was designed in 1931 by the famous Finnish architect and designer Alvar Aalto to furnish the lounges of one of his first major works, the Paimio Sanatorium. The chair encapsulated the spirit of the place to such perfection that it became widely known as the Paimio. This ethereal armchair, which was a first for its time, broke with the trend for tubular steel. It was usually made in birch. Thanks to the use of plywood, the seat and the back of the Paimio are molded in one single piece, which is what gives it such a striking appearance. Aalto suspended a wave in mid-air. To give it a perfect finish, he added 4 discrete slits. Black or white, the seat is screwed to 2 bent wooden frames that form both the legs and armrests of the Paimio. Absent from this prototype made of beechwood, a supporting bar was soon added to the armchair structure. The beauty and modernity of this icon of Scandinavian design are plain to see, but it is the humanism the chair emits that really sets the Paimio apart. Its designer was a functionalist who placed human beings at the heart of his work. His prime concern was the well-being of the little man, as he put it, in reference to Charlie Chaplin's Tramp. Man had been using wood to make furniture for thousands of years. He had cut it, carved it, sanded it, and pierced it, most often using a single block. In the 1830s, Michael Tonet, a German furniture maker and industrialist, took advantage of the thermoformability of wood, or its capacity to change shape under the action of heat. He developed a bending process using the combined action of heat and steam. In order to mass-produce his furniture, Tonet took a gamble on the interchangeability of the pieces. The company produced a range of armchairs in bent wood, consisting of chairs as famous as the number 18, the Bopard chair. The chimney armchair, number 6371, and the rocking chair, number 7500, that was exported all over the world. At the end of the First World War, tubular steel replaced wood in modern furniture making. Inspired by the shape of a racing bike handlebar, Marcel Breuer created a frame in bent tubular steel for the famous B3 cantilever armchair, which was quickly renamed the Wassily in homage to Kandinsky. Along with the Wagenfield table lamp, the B35 canvas chair, Mies van der Rohe's MR20, or the famous S285 desk, it enshrined the cold and functional spirit of the Bauhaus movement. From then on, everyday objects were mass-produced. Their form was determined by their function. It was the birth of design. Inspired by this movement, Aalto sought to introduce wood into contemporary design. From 1929, he worked with the carpenter Otto Korhonen, manager of the Turku factory. For their experiments, the two men were able to take advantage of a newly available chemical glue, casein. It was much more resistant, opening up further possibilities for glued laminated wood, which could now be bent without breaking. The Paimio's frame benefited from this revolutionary technique. Once the piece had been shaped, it was dried for 24 hours before being removed from its mold, then cut in two. The famous technique, playing on the thickness of the sheets of wood in relation to the curve and the desired resistance of the seat, made it possible to obtain the wavy shape, linking the seat and the back of the Paimio in one and the same piece of bent plywood. Covered in black or white lacquered paint, the seat is then screwed to the two horizontal bars linked to the frame of the chair. The geographical origin of the Paimio was a key factor, and Aalto's ambition to bring a finished touch to modern furniture can be better understood in the light of its historical context. In 1931, Finland was a young nation that took advantage of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution to free itself from the Russian Empire and gain independence. The country only finally opted for a democratic regime at the price of a devastating civil war between the Reds and the Whites. In spite of the victory of the Whites, the specter of a proletarian revolution haunted the ensuing years. It fed ideological discourse on the extreme right, fanned by the economic crisis of the 30s. Two-thirds of the population were still living in the countryside, and signs of discontent multiplied. The Lapua agrarian movement even organized a march on Helsinki. It was in this context of unrest that Aalto decided to break with a neoclassical style of architecture. The sanatorium that he built at Paimio, a small town in southwest Finland, was considered to be one of the major works of his youth. It was one of the first buildings of Aalto's modern period. Loyal to the functionalism that was in vogue at that time, for which form had to be an expression of use. The general layout of the building was fragmented. Each wing corresponded to a part of its program. It was biodynamically set out according to the cardinal points, and its architecture followed some of Le Corbusier's pioneering ideas, such as ribbon windows, roof terraces, and the machine aesthetic. Delays in the works linked to the crisis and a lack of raw materials meant Aalto could take personal charge of the interior decoration of the sanatorium. For the lounges, Aalto needed light, flexible, and hygienic furniture. The Paimio armchair possessed all these qualities. It belonged to a range that was made up of a wide variety of seats in bent plywood. 41, 31, 51, 26, 36. Among all these models, it was the 41 that best enshrined the spirit of the sanatorium. It was simply a matter of course that people adopted it under the name Paimio. As a designer, Aalto usually worked with his first wife, Aino. Their objects often served a wider project and were made to be accessories of architecture. The sanatorium was the first building that was entirely furnished by the couple. They even designed the lamps and a massage table, complete with a bent plywood top. To fully understand the Paimio, we need to examine the general philosophy the project was part of. What set Aalto apart from other functionalist architects was his profound desire to adopt the point of view of the patients and to give the building an active role in their convalescence. The extreme care he took over the interior design of the patients' rooms bears witness to this. The curtains matched the trees of the neighboring forest. Lamps were located out of the patient's field of vision. And the paints used had soothing hues. All these details contributed to the place's serenity. Even the wash basins were designed so that the water ran silently and without splashing. The angle between the seat and the back of the Paimio armchair afforded the ideal position for breathing. The relative hardness of its seat would keep the patients awake. This initial Paimio accessory soon moved beyond the establishment's lounges. The sanatorium sealed Aalto's international reputation, not only as an architect, but also as a designer. From 1933, his furniture was exhibited at Fortnum and Mason in London. It met with such critical and public acclaim that exports took off immediately, creating the need for a company that would manage the marketing and distribution of Aalto's furniture. That task befell Artek. Built on the couple's philosophy, which was to design functional objects on a human level, the company had a design office run by Aino, who created interiors and new versions of furniture and objects for the Aalto range. In addition to showroom and several shops, the company also had an art gallery at the time, where the works of famous artists such as Léger and Calder were exhibited.
Artek perustettiin vuonna 1935, itse asiassa 15.10. Ja Artekin perustamiseen on varmasti syynä se, että 4 lahjakasta ihmistä kohtasi toisensa, jolloin syntyi ajatus siitä, että synnyttäisi markkinointiyhtiö Alvar Aallon suunnittelemien huonekalujen markkinoimiseksi ja myymiseksi maailmalla. Artec todellakin tulee yhdistelmästä art and technology, eli tavallaan juuri tämä art and technology kertoo myöskin siitä, että he halusivat yhdistää tietyllä tavalla niin kuin emotionaalisen ja tämmöisen niin kuin tieteellisen tulokulman eli rationaalisen ajattelun. Et toisaalta Aalto oli vahvasti niin kuin standardien ja teknologian ajattelija, joka halusi luoda niin kuin systeemiteorioita. Et hän ei pelkästään halunnut tehdä yhtä yksittäistä tuotetta, vaan rakentaa komponenteista nimenomaan tuotteita, joita voidaan niin kuin modifioida edelleen ja edelleen. Ja L-jalka on nimenomaan tämä teknologian mukaan tuominen, eli koko Aallon malliston taustallahan on myöskin tämmöinen L-jalan standardisointi, toisaalta Paimion tuotteiden kaltainen taiteen veistoksellisuuden muotoilu.
The Artec company's work was mainly based on Aalto's architectural career. The company's design office carried out the furnishing of nearly all his buildings. It also designed interiors for buildings designed by other architects. One of the most brilliant global concepts born out of Alvar's and Aino's partnership is the Savoy restaurant in Helsinki, the interior decoration of which has remained virtually the same since the 30s. Thanks to Artec, nearly 150 Paimio chairs are still produced each year and sold all over the world. The Finnish company also works with young designers whose task is to break free from Aalto while remaining faithful to his approach to design. Tom Blixen, the new creative director of Artec, is careful to respect the company's spirit by choosing ecological materials and promoting sustainable design. The Bamboo series brilliantly illustrates this change in continuity. From the mid-30s, Aalto's international reputation had made him into a sort of missionary of Finland. Through his creations, he conveyed a certain image of his country, its landscapes, and its culture. Aalto was among those who believed that modernity was not opposed to tradition, and that the democratization of design would help to open up modern art. With the Paimio armchair, the Savoy vase, and the Maria Villa, he put forward a more accessible and less doctrinaire version of modernism. Thanks to his style, with its undulating forms and natural materials, the Finnish designer contributed in his own way to opening up biomorphism, the branch of modern art that stemmed from Expressionism, the Dada movement, and Surrealism. In the 30s, abstract art tended towards more flexible forms, seeking a synthesis between abstraction and surrealism. Artists such as Jean Arp, Juan Miró, Salvador Dali, and Alexander Calder introduced soft, rounded, and organic shapes that contrasted sharply with the geometric art that they often found cold, rational, and lacking emotion. This relaxation in the theory of previous aesthetics went in the direction of humanism and took nature, biological forms, and life rhythms into account. Since its birth around 1920, the current of Scandinavian design was supported by a humanist philosophy with its origins in Lutheranism, which insisted on truth and reason by teaching that one could reach salvation through honest work, benefiting one's fellow man. The spectacular landscapes of the Nordic countries widely inspired these designers by suggesting to them that nature, with its changing beauty, was the most pertinent of models. By counterbalancing the demands of the machine with human needs, artists as famous as Alvar Aalto, Arne Jacobsen, Marimekko, and Tapio Virkala instilled a soul into modern design.
The retiring Prime Minister of Ontario, Leslie M. Frost, has a pleasant task as one of his last official acts. It's a visit to the 3rd annual Scandinavian Fair in Toronto.
It wasn't, however, until the 50s that the term Scandinavian design appeared, and that the Nordic style became popular thanks to traveling exhibitions such as Design in Scandinavia, which from 1954 to 1957 traveled all over the United States and Canada. But no one has done more for the reputation of Nordic design than IKEA. Founded in 1943, the Swedish firm made furniture and items with a highly democratic spirit. Its approach was summed up in one slogan: form, function, and affordability. IKEA started by selling furniture at factory prices by mail order, then decided to make practical products that were well designed and accessible to the greatest number of people. Doesn't the Puang armchair by Japanese designer Noboru Nakamura, so powerful, so blonde, and so typically Scandinavian, bear a resemblance to another armchair created in the early 30s? A veritable precursor of organic design, Alvar Aalto exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in New York from 1939. 2 years later, he was on the jury of the Organic Design in Home Furnishings exhibition, which awarded 2 first prizes to the duo formed by Charles Eames and Eero Saarinen, a friend with Finnish origins, for their project of furniture made in molded plywood. The line of descent of the Paimio's creator was now ensured. In 1942, Charles and Ray Eames worked with the Army, for which they designed splints, stretchers, and plane cockpits in Bend Plywood. Building on this experience, they returned to furniture with the DCW chair that they cut into several parts to reach their objective of affordable, high-quality design. But it was the famous light structural shells, molded according to 3-dimensional forms, that remained their trademark. That of the organic chair, created with Eero Saarinen, was directly influenced by shapes in nature. Organic style had found its symbol. It flourished in a post-war society heavily influenced by the American way of life. Higher incomes and widely available credit led to rocketing household consumption. With housing, furniture, electrical goods, and cars, mass production became widespread. Very quickly, people were not content to just buy comfort. They had to reveal their social standing and set themselves apart. In its own way, the organic trend tried to marry standardized comfort with unusual shapes to make everyday living more poetic. The arrival of new materials like polyurethane foam and thermoplastic enabled Werner Panton to further develop the pursuit of form in the organic movement by designing, then standardizing, the first monoblock cantilever chair in a synthetic material. The Paimio was a paradox. Its primary aim was to contribute to the well-being of tuberculosis sufferers in a sanatorium, but it survived the illness to become a cult object of design, famous for its shape. Retaining just its appearance, claiming an artistic process that was freed from the constraints of functionalism, was only a step away. The postmodernists were quick to take that step, with creations stamped with their designer's individuality, declining all responsibility towards clients and users. As for the number 41 armchair, it has always managed to maintain a subtle balance between abstraction, tradition, and the influence of nature. The Paimio is ageless. So fine was its inspiration from shapes in nature. It has now become part of the landscape.